Hello everyone, I'm TJ Reiser. I'm the acting principal tuba of the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. We're going to wait a few minutes here and get some people on the live stream. And once we get going from there, I'm going to be talking about how to make metal make music and all the things that we can do when we're holding a big old hunk of brass in our lap to make it a little bit more musical. So while we're waiting for a few folks to join the live stream, I thought I'd just make music with you for a second. So here's my terrible ukulele playing. A worried man, I'm a very worried man. My hungry babies don't understand that Papa is a worried man. That Papa is a worried man. The place I go to draw my pay, it slammed the door on me today, and they told me just to stay away and don't come back again. I went home to break the news. My woman saw that I had the blues, but she said the babies need new shoes. Now I'm a worried man. A worried man, I'm a worried man. Oh, I'm a very worried man. Hungry babies don't understand that they Papa is a worried man. That Papa is a worried man. Well, there's no way that I can see for me to feed my family. I don't own a money tree and I got very little land. But I said, Mama, now, please don't cry. I'll get a job before the day goes by. But I don't know where, and so that's why I am a worried man. Well, I got muscle, and I got brain. I don't even mind the sun and rain. I got to make a little change, so I'm not a worried man. A worried man, a worried man. Oh, I'm a very worried man. My hungry babies don't understand that they Papa is a worried man. That Papa is a worried man. And I thought that kind of fit the vibe of the times right now. That's Worried Man by Johnny Cash. So translating a little bit of the singing into the instrument, I'm going to try to do my very best Frank Sinatra impression with my tuba. Well, thank you all for joining me. It's great to see so many of you out there. Hi, Tuba Terra. Hi, Evan. How's the tuba going? I know you were into the honor band this year, so that's very, very cool. Dr. Bachman, good to see you out there. So I wanted to talk just a little bit today about making music when you've got, 20, 30, 40 pounds of metal in your lap. So the first point I wanted to make is not only should we have our heroes that we like to emulate on our instrument, we should also have those same type of heroes that are singers. So the first thing I did, if you were a little late to the stream, is I played some ukulele and sang a Johnny Cash tune. And I just finished now doing a Frank Sinatra chart of a Hoagie Carmichael tune, Skylark. So let's just think a little bit about what's the main difference between playing an instrument and singing. Or maybe the most stark couple of differences. First off, we don't have the words, and oftentimes the words are the easiest way to make that human connection. And then the natural cadence of breathing. It's a really important thing that we sometimes forget when we're playing instruments. My colleagues who are up front in the orchestra playing string instruments, they have to breathe enough to not pass out, but they don't have to breathe to play their instruments. But if you both watch and listen to the very best string quartets in the world, all of them are breathing together, and that aids them with putting their ensemble together at the beginning of phrases, at the end of phrases, and just breathing in a musical way in between can make the ensemble that much better. And again, having that cadence of a human voice is a really important thing. So if I go on continuously and just keep talking and never take a breath and I just keep going, it doesn't quite sound right, and it's something that could happen on the oboe maybe or on the stringed instruments, but all of us are going to get more and more uncomfortable and my tone is going to start suffering, and eventually I'm going to have a real problem if I don't take a breath, and that is the real... Okay, so that's one end of the problem. And on the other end of the spectrum, I sit in the very back corner of the orchestra, and I have this big instrument that I'm dealing with. And every octave you go down on a brass instrument takes twice as much air. So if we look over at the trumpet players, that takes a pretty human amount of air. Of course, they have to have great control of their air. But as you go an octave down from the trumpet to the trombone, which is an 8-foot instrument, or a 9-foot instrument, sorry, that'll take twice as much air to play at the same dynamic level. And then when you come down to the tuba on the bottom of the foundation, that's 4 times as much air as a trumpet player has to use, or twice as much air as a trombone player. So to get any of the effect of a singer, I need to have a lot of strategies for breathing. So just as if I continued talking without breathing, if I breathe between every word, you wouldn't want to listen to me for very long. And that's the case with the tuba. If I'm trying to really go full out in the orchestra, I can't keep up with the trumpets and the trombones. There's only about 5'9" of me, so I'm a pretty normal-sized guy, and so I don't have chest from here to here and 8 liters of lung capacity, so I have to have a lot of strategies for that. So breathing it's such an important thing to what we do. I just thought it'd be fun to do a little bit of breathing back and forth here. I steal these exercises from something called the Breathing Gym, which was developed by 2 of my tuba heroes, Pat Sheridan and Sam Palafian. So first off, let's all stand up if you're able and willing. And I will never know if you're not able or willing, so do what you want. Tense up your whole body. Let's create some tension and then get rid of it. So breathe in and create some tension. And then explode that tension out. Okay, that feels really good. And if you're anything like me, your shoulders will drop a little bit, and your voice might even drop a little bit. So let's do that one more time. Create a bunch of tension in your face and your hands, and then let that tension explode out of your body. Cool. So, yeah, I see a Go Breathing Gym in there and a bunch of folks to wave at. Yeah, it's all good stuff. And I don't care if you play the piano or you sing or you play the tuba. Breathing Gym is helpful and healthy. And can be really useful. So once we've gotten rid of a little bit of tension, my notes blew right off the stand when I was breathing just there. Let's just stretch out our breathing apparatus by swinging side to side. And if you want to take that little bit of stretch a little deeper, exhale each time you hit the edge of that swing. Big sigh. And again, if you've been a little bit stressed out in these somewhat uncertain times, just doing that kind of breathing can bring your heart rate down and can reduce a lot of stress. And then, of course, when you're playing the tuba, being a little bit more flexible and having a little bit more of your vital capacity available to you can be really useful. So let's try another one. This is pianissimo air, and I'm going to float a paper airplane straight through your screen. So we're going to breathe in as we pull back, and then float that paper airstream on the airstream, airplane on the airstream. One more. And at pianissimo, I can kind of keep that going almost indefinitely. Not quite, but for a long time. So imagine that paper airplane's just a little bit heavier, something like a dart. So we're going to throw that dart, and it's going to be harder to keep it afloat. It's going to take more air to keep that up in the air. So pull back and throw me a mezzo forte dart. Big sigh. Okay, and let's go one more level, bigger, heavier. It's going to take more air to keep it up. Bow and arrow. So pull back, breathe. Fortissimo. And again, big sigh. Okay. So I'm going to sit back down. You're welcome to do whatever you like in your own space. So for me, being able to just move enough air to keep up with a phrase that a singer might make is a big deal. So it's one of the things that comes up the most often when I'm talking to people off stage. And so I wanted to start there because without the air as the impetus for what we do, it's hard to really get any farther than that, honestly. And I must say at this point, I'm really in debt to Arnold Jacobs, who was the tuba player for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra from 1944 until 1988, in that this entire presentation is basically going to boil down to what was his mantra or motto, wind and song. So I started out with some song, gave you some breeze to think about wind, and just to make a couple little points here about singers, I just wanted to mention, as a classical tuba player, of course, I have classical heroes as singers, guys like Ezio Pinza. Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau is one of the gold standards, a little bit more modern, the Welsh bass baritone Bryn Terfel. But then I also have a lot of heroes that are not necessarily classical musicians. I'm a big fan of Johnny Cash. I think Willie Nelson is one of the most unique people in terms of the way they make a phrase, and maybe the most unique person since Louis Armstrong in terms of the way he sits on top of the ensemble and creates a phrase that makes total sense but is kind of floating outside of time. So have your heroes, and they can be absolutely anything. It can be a metal singer if you want it to be. And when you're playing the tuba, people may or may not know that that's what's going on in your head. When I got the best compliment from my teacher during grad school, I was pretending in my head to be a country singer, Hank Williams, and I was playing a tuba concerto, so no one would have ever taken Hank Williams from what I was doing, but it got me compliments from my teacher in that I was making the most compelling phrase that I had made. So, if we're thinking in terms of song, and then we're acting physically in terms of wind, I just wanted to let you in on kind of one more little secret tool of the trade that you may not have heard as much about, and that's something called circular breathing. So again, if I'm having to move 4 times as much air as my trumpet colleagues when we're making the same phrase together, I would have to take 4 times as many breaths to keep up with them. So I kind of sneakily get air through my nose while I'm still expelling the air that's in my mouth. Let's see if I can get a little bit closer here for you. So. And that's an old didgeridoo technique that has been used on most instruments at this point. I believe that the soprano sax player has the world record for the longest single note using circular breathing. Yeah, I guess I gained some jazz street cred for getting that soprano saxophone player's name. So there are times in the orchestra when I might use that to keep up, such as Die Meistersinger von Nuremberg. I'm playing with bassoons and cello and basses. It's not a solo like tuba players will tell you, and I will circular breathe so that I can make a more human length to the phrase. So let me maybe play a little bit of that for you. So hopefully I pulled that off well enough to show you at least a little bit of circular breathing so that, again, I can make phrases with the bassoons that take significantly less air than the tuba, and the basses and celli, who don't really take any air except to keep from falling over. Is that making sense to everybody? Hello, Tuba Man 365. Hello, Catherine Zetapus. Hello, E-Tromba. I see all kinds of fun people in here. I'm just going to wave at you. This is my very first live stream, so sorry if anything's a little bit weird, but I'm doing my best. So that's breathing as it relates to, hello, Catherine, as it relates to playing the tuba and then trying to make music. So there are a few physical skills, and I wasn't going to get into those today. Maybe we can do a second episode where I talk a little bit more about the physical skills that we need with the tuba. But at its most basic core, I need to be able to articulate so that I can start a note. I need to have a great tone that's consistent so that people want to listen to me. And then I need to have flexibility, or the ability to move away from that note to all the other notes. So if I have articulation, tone, and flexibility, then I can start thinking about all these musical things, which now 20 minutes in is really the heart of what I wanted to talk about today. How to make more music with this big old piece of metal in my lap. So when someone asks you to be more musical, think for a second, what are they asking for? And again, I like to try to drill down to just the very lowest level, most basic level I can think of. And what I've come up with thinking on that question is they want more differences. So if somebody asks me to be more musical, they think I'm just doing everything the same. And yeah, maybe I'm playing the right notes, maybe I'm playing the right rhythms, in time, in tune, all those things, but it's not fun to listen to because everything's the same and there's not enough differences. Does that make sense? Well, I guess type in if it doesn't, but silly when I can't hear you to ask that question. So in terms of musical differences, as a guy who sits in the back row, the main thing that I have control of is how loud I play versus how soft I play. Keep that on screen. And then how many levels there are in between. So it shouldn't just be fortissimo and pianissimo and nothing else. Although oftentimes, if I just do that when I'm playing a solo, people react more because they're hearing a clear difference between what loud is and what soft is. And then, of course, I want to have the different shades, just like the volume knob on your radio. How loud can I go? How soft can I go? And how many clicks are there of the little knob in between? So hopefully that one's obvious. How loud and how soft is what I have the most control of from the back of the orchestra. On top of that, I can also decide how long I'm going to play a note, how short I'm going to play a note, and how many levels there are in between. So if you want to think of them as a volume knob, like we did before with loud and soft, or just put it out on a spectrum of very, very long, very, very short, and everything in between. And I kind of like to make a subcategory on this one, where in addition to long and short, I think heavy and light, because the combination of weight and length is what's going to define my style. So again, maybe I should split these out and they should be two different categories, but how long and how short, and how many levels I can have in between, and then how heavy or how light I play on that, and how many levels in between. So I have a little less control of this next one as a player in the orchestra, but that musical difference is going to be how fast or how slow. So usually I look up to the guy in front and they will tell me how fast or how slow they'd like me to play. And I'll do everything that I can to stick with them while also sticking with all of my colleagues beside and in front of me. But as a soloist, I get to choose then how fast or how slow I go. And then this one gets a little more esoteric, especially for a lot of classical musicians who are not used to composing or improvising. But the last of my big four musical differences is how high or how low. So on a micro level in the orchestra, I have some control over that. And that's going to be, of course, my intonation. I want to play in tune with the rest of the ensemble. But also, hopefully you heard a little bit if you were here when I played some Sinatra earlier, I'm going to use a little bit of vibrato. And part of that is, like I mentioned in the beginning, I want to have my vocal heroes and I want to try to emulate what they do as much as possible. So being a tuba player, I listen to people with low voices because generally the vibrato tends to be both wider and slower than if I'm going to listen to Renee Fleming or any of the great sopranos out there. So I try to match up as much as possible with the bass baritone voices in there for vibrato. And again, I'm getting a little bit in the weeds here, but again, musical differences, high and low and how many levels in between. In the orchestra, I try to hold the pitch down because I'm the lowest voice around. And so if anything, we want kind of like a piano where there's stretch tuning and the lower octaves are a little bit lower compared to 440, A440 tuning, and the highest octaves can be a little bit higher. The problem occurs when those of us with the lowest voices, if we play sharp, it kind of forces everybody up. So in terms of how high and how low, me as a performer in the orchestra or the band, I just try to hold everybody down as best I can while continuing to play in tune with the group. But if you're composing, or if you're orchestrating, or if you are improvising, a change in the octave or what set of notes even that you choose to play makes all the difference in the world. So I've been rambling here for a while. I wanted to play just a little bit to give you an idea of what I mean when I say put all those things on a spectrum. So here's a tune. I'm going to emulate the way it is sung most of the time, and we'll go from there. So I assume anyone who's ever been in a beginner band class knows that tune. And that was moderately fast, moderately light, moderately short, just kind of the way it's generally sung. Hold on a second, I'm going to take a quick drink of water. So think about those different dials I gave you. Loud and soft, short and long, fast and slow, high and low. So if I change just one of those things, let me think of how high or low I played that just now. If I just went up or down an octave, it's a completely different experience, or down. we could change keys, or like famously Mahler did with a tune like this, if we just change the pitch on one note, and suddenly we have. Boy, I change high and low on one note, and it's a completely different experience. So, remembering, just to reiterate, because that's most of what I do every day as a teacher, I'm going to say how loud can I play, how soft can I play, and how many levels in between. How long can I play, how short can I play, and how many levels in between. How fast can I play, how slow can I play, and how many levels in between. And then more if you're talking about orchestration or composing or improvising, how high am I going to play, how low am I going to play, and can I play all the keys in between even. So let's just turn the dial on a couple of those things. Let's play very loud, let's play very short, and we'll go short and heavy, loud, and let's say slow, and let's see how Mary Had a Little Lamb sounds. And yeah, probably nobody wants to listen to that. But my point being that within every exercise or piece of music is every other exercise or piece of music. I could work almost infinitely on my tuba playing by playing Mary Had a Little Lamb at different pitch levels, at different speeds, at different dynamic levels, and at different styles by playing around with how long and how short, and how heavy or how light. So if that makes sense to everybody, that's really the meat and potatoes of what I wanted to present today. I see all kinds of fun people have joined in with us. Does anybody have any questions that you'd like to type on in there, and I'll see what I can do. Hello, everybody. Have I waved to everyone that's on there? All kinds of people. Wow. Okay, so if you have any questions, send them along, and I'll do my best. No promises here on a live thing. A request to be in your live video. What does that mean? I don't even know. Let's go with live and see what happens. Nothing? Okay. We will skip that for now. Hello, hello. Okay. So I've got some waves in there. It doesn't look like I have any questions, but again, if you have any, please bring them along. That would be great. So I mentioned a little bit earlier when I was playing around with Mary Had a Little Lamb, Mahler played with just changing one note of a folk song. So do you all know? So that's the tuba solo from Mahler's First Symphony. We come in after the bass player does. And it's just, I knew it as, are you sleeping, Brother John, Brother John? And just by changing the third down to minor, it changes everything about it, and it freaks everybody out. So, putting it back in major just turns it right back into that nursery rhyme. So, like I say, if you're composing, if you're improvising, or if you're orchestrating, just changing a couple of notes here and there and changing the mode from major to minor makes a big difference in how that is effective to the audience. Cool. Let me see what these little happy faces here mean. Nope, I can't tell. Okay, well, it's about 3:30. I've covered a lot of what I was hoping to. There's my good friend Jonathan DeSoto says, how would you create music in the pedal register where it must take lots of air for the tuba player? So seems like you almost answered that question in your question. It takes lots of air for the tuba player down in that register, so you have to account for that. You have to either bring a couple of tuba players in or orchestrate the bass trombone with them or the basses so that there's a chance for the tuba player to breathe
because circular breathing becomes less and less and less effective the lower you go. So if there are a few more rests in there for a tuba player to grab a breath, or you can orchestrate something else in there to help the tuba player. Trying to think, Deutsche Requiem, the Brahms, we did a season or two ago. I got some comments afterwards about how I played through that pedal D for 4 minutes, and turns out I had to rest every single bar. It's just that my good friend Rudy Hain was sitting next to me, matching me the best he possibly could with sound and pitch, so that from the audience it sounded like we were just this continuous loud phrase, like I got some sort of bellows that I'm pumping in. But it was just the fact that it was orchestrated well enough for me to catch my breaths without being upsetting to the rest of the group and the audience. Tuba Man 365 says, I just played Mahler third, lol. I wanted to ask about the difference between loud playing in an orchestra and an audition. Well, in both situations, you don't want to freak the people in front of you out, honestly. Almost never is there a tuba player on the committee when you audition. So if you just come in and play as loud as you can all the time, it's going to probably be upsetting to the principal oboist, the principal violinist, the principal violist who might be on your panel. So I wouldn't recommend going in and just playing as loud as you can, because again, it might freak out the people on the other side of the panel. And then also, they may be messing with you or they may not. What happens when they ask for more? So I always want to save a little bit when I'm in an audition, so that if I'm asked for more, I can give a little bit more. I'm not going to acknowledge Rudy Freediver there. You all can read his comment if you want to. And then in the orchestra, I have a lot more cues from around me as to how loud I need to play. I'll see how loud the rest of the brasses are playing, what the hull can take, and what's going on with the percussion behind me. Oftentimes, the conductor will just tell me, whoa, that's enough, or I just can't hear you, and then let's go. And it really has been both of those things, surprisingly, in a few situations. I played the bear solo from Petrushka a few years ago, and a conductor stopped everything in the rehearsal and said, tuba, this says 4 Fs, you just gave me 9. So mission accomplished, he got his point across, and I played a little bit softer the next time. So it's a little bit of a bumpy road when you're playing an audition, because you just don't know what they want. So I would always save a little bit on the top and bottom side of my dynamic range, so that from behind the screen they can ask for more or less. And then in the orchestra, I'm going to try to match what's happening with my colleagues. And if one of them wants more or less, they're welcome to tell me. I'm pretty approachable. And for sure, the person up on the podium is the one in charge, and they'll let you know that's too much or that's not enough, or something like that. Thank you, Dave. I finally figured out that I flipped my phone around. That was my problem there. I see, how is it to play hundreds of concerts a year between multiple ensembles? Must be a busy life. Well, thank you for that question. For those of you who don't know me or don't know, I play in the section in the Royal Hawaiian Band, and I play with the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. So the Royal Hawaiian Band, we play 5 days a week, 50 weeks out of the year, and oftentimes it's multiple concerts in a day. So that group may do 300, 350 concerts in a year. And then we've got the regular subscription series and the pops and all of that with the HSO. So I do play a heck of a lot of tuba. And so it can really, really be a balancing act. I've actually hurt myself a few times when I was trying to work up an audition or work up a recital, just because I get overzealous and I want to keep playing. But there is a physical limit, and as I'm turning the corner of 40 this year, your body just doesn't want to mash itself between your hard teeth and your hard mouthpiece all the time. So what I have found the best way for me to practice, if I can clear the time in my schedule, is to do 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes within an hour, and then just walk away from the tuba, come back on the next hour and do that same 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And if you do that whenever you can, sort of catch as catch can throughout the day, it gives me the opportunity to practice and keep improving my craft without hurting myself. So thank you for that question. Yeah, it is a lot of playing. There's just no two ways about it. I'm incredibly blessed and thankful that I get to play the tuba for a living, and I get to live in one of the most beautiful places in the world. But I had to learn that about myself over the last decade or so. I'm not 18 anymore. I'm not made of rubber. And I have to find ways to strategize what I'm going to play. And in the same way, if I'm playing something that's incredibly loud and long and all that in the orchestra, I'll practice something that's soft, nimble, jumping around a little bit, and vice versa. So that what I'm doing in the orchestra is taking care of that for my chops. So I'm going to take care of the rest of my skills. I hope that makes sense. What role does physical fitness play in supporting your breathing? Thank you. Sorry, I can't beam you up. Good one. I think that must be Scotty. I think it's a really important thing. And I've, of course, like most people, had my ups and downs over the years. It's hard to look at me now and recognize this, but I actually was a certified group aerobics instructor for a few years, and I made some side money doing that. And I've ran a couple of marathons and done a few things here and there. So I do think physical fitness is really important, especially the older you get, because you want to maintain all the physical strength and flexibility that you can. And just being out in good cardiovascular shape means that you're going to breathe easier. And if I haven't mentioned it, breathing like we did at the beginning there, doing some of the breathing gym stuff, that's taken from some yogic breathing. And it's something that can just be the most healthy possible thing. Breathing is something that's actually assigned to people when they're recovering from surgery. And there'll be machines to monitor how much you're breathing and how well you're breathing. But your physical fitness will get better all the time just through breathing and playing, and carrying this big old piece of metal around is a little bit of strength and cardio training. So I don't think you need to be huge and strong, but as long as you stay flexible, it can't hurt. You probably don't need to run an entire marathon, but as long as you do it in a healthy way, it can't hurt. So I think absolutely physical fitness makes a big, big difference, because it's a very, very physical thing that we do playing these instruments. We forget that sometimes. There goes my screen. These are muscles. They're in here, there are muscles. They're very, very tiny muscles. And I've found over the years that also these, the muscles, the tendons, the passages, are very, very small, and they can only take so much. So the stronger you can be, the better it will be for you. Hey, Eric, good to see you on here. I'm glad it wasn't too late for you. Fafner808 says, hey, TJ, how do you work on building your tone to get that orchestral sound? So I like to think good sound is good sound. So I don't want to super differentiate my sound in the orchestra versus my sound outside of the orchestra. And then also, especially because I just flat out have fewer notes than my colleagues, I like to think of myself as a color artist. So I want to bring a lot of different colors to the table when I'm playing in the orchestra. I don't want to just have the one big dark orchestral sound. There's a place for that, and I absolutely want to do that. But I want to be able to change my tone, and I'll do that through both equipment and approach. A lot of the things I talked about earlier with how long, how short, how heavy, how light, all of that stuff. But in building up your sound, building up your tone, I think one of the best things you can do is buzz the mouthpiece. Because it doesn't have the resistance of the tuba, it's like overtraining. If I was a football player or a boxer or something, I might bench press 300 pounds. And that's not going to say every punch I throw or every time I come up off the line, I'm pressing that 300 pounds. But boy, if you put 30 in my hands, it's going to be real easy. So I like to overtrain the efficiency of my chops in air by buzzing on the mouthpiece. And something just really simple, like a 1-5-1. And then descending. To me, that's the best way to build up efficiency with what I'm doing by overtraining those things. And then, of course, like one of my teachers, Sam McMorrin, used to say, he's a canoe athlete. He'd say, everybody's into cross training and doing this, that, and the other, but at some point you just got to row. So if you want to make a big orchestral sound, practice long tones and play them louder than you can. Because if you always stay below the level at which you can play in total control, you'll never gain more control. So sometimes you got to go past control. I'm going to do that in the practice room. I'm not going to do that on stage with my colleagues, but I'm just going to keep butting up against what my limits are and hopefully keep pushing those limits up and sometimes going beyond them and saying, yeah, I can't really control that yet, and playing around in there. Travis, go ahead and ask again if I didn't cover what you're asking, but I hope that helps with the big orchestral sound. Hey, Andy, good to see you on here. Andy was a good friend of mine in high school who played the tuba. Do you still play any tuba? I know he's a heck of a guitar player. Eric was a friend of mine, Eric Stauffer, who played the trumpet in high school and then eventually became a tuba player, so that's cool. Hello, Chesters. I see a CT, TPT. I assume there's a trumpet in there. Hello to you, too. I think that about covers all the questions that I've seen on here. If you have any more questions, I'll hang around for a few more minutes. Unfortunately, do not have a tuba. I'm sorry about that, Andy. There's lots of tubas around. If you frequent Craigslist or flea markets and that kind of thing, there's always a tuba to find, but I know you must be playing a heck of a lot of guitar and making a lot of music. And that's one point I like to make to a lot of people. We get out of high school or college and we don't have the opportunities to play in a large ensemble. Again, I'm incredibly lucky to have the opportunities to play in an orchestra and a band. And sometimes playing the tuba is just too much. It's a big, expensive piece of equipment. Play an ukulele, play a guitar, sing in the shower. But music is an incredibly, incredibly human thing. I hope you all consider yourself musicians, whether you do it for money or not. It's all good. And again, Andy's one of the best guitar players I've ever met, so I'm sure you're still making plenty of music. Okay, thank you. It did cover. Reminds me of what Don told me. Yeah. If I haven't mentioned it before, Don Harry is another of my teachers, and almost everything that I'm saying to you is my loopy version of something that Don has told me in the past. And I'd love to shout out to my first major teacher, Mike Thornton, who played in the Cincinnati Symphony. Mike's not with us anymore, but boy, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without his influence. Scotty says, most tubas are in your house. Sorry if I took up most of the tubas. Yeah, sorry, 3 p.m. Hawaii time is different. 9 p.m. on the East Coast and 6 p.m. on the West Coast. Great. Yeah, so good to talk to y'all. It's been very cool to do this. I think it might be about time to wrap up. Anybody have any requests? You'd like to hear anything else? I could knock out some tuba excerpts or something like that. I think it was Rudy Hain put together the blurb to advertise this today, and he mentioned how the Dies Irae is part of what we do. And since that's both singing and takes some interesting breathing to get through and make the sounds of those church bells that can really be haunting, here's some Dies Irae. So that's the Dies Irae. It's used in actually a tremendous amount of pieces, but the tuba version, which is actually originally an Ophicleide version, comes from Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique, and it's one of the few pieces that has 2 tuba parts. So it was actually the very first thing I got to play with an orchestra. I played it alongside Mike Thornton in the Cincinnati Symphony, and then again alongside Sam McMorrin in the Knoxville Symphony. And we've actually played it twice here in the Hawaii Symphony since I've been here. And got to play it with Don Pallmeyer and former HSO principal John Elliott. So thanks, guys. It was great to have you, and thanks to my teachers for letting me play those things. I see a little bit of Johnny Cash on the tuba, Vaughn Williams. I actually sang a little bit of Johnny Cash a little bit earlier here. Let me see if I can knock something out without... So there's Ring of Fire on the tuba for you. What did I say, Vaughn Williams? Yeah, I guess that was in Rudy's blurb as well. Everybody's favorite lick. Something like that, anyway. Yeah, Jonathan asks, auditions can be nerve-wracking. How do you tackle those obstacles, especially if you're auditioning for college or something for the first time? So, first off, when you actually get there, yes, it may be the first time you show up somewhere, but it won't be the first time you've done it if you've done it in your head 1,000 times. So I think it's really important to visualize in as much detail as you possibly can what it's going to be like to walk into that room, maybe see a famous teacher that you've never seen before, or that wall of the screen if it's an orchestral audition. And yeah, the think method from the Music Man, just do it over and over as many times as you can while you're lying in bed getting ready to go to sleep at night. Think through everything you can. What do my valves feel like? What does the hot room or the cold room feel like? What is the feedback I'm getting? There's a million variables, but you're going to control that variable and remind yourself that I'm just going to play great no matter what happens. And that being said, sometimes you get nervous, sometimes you get less nervous, and that's just the way it is. Maybe drink a lot less coffee or eat a lot less sugar in the couple of days or weeks or months, depending on how into that you are leading up to the audition, because anything that can cause you to really kick your heart rate up can be very distracting. So yeah, absolutely. Auditions can be nerve-wracking. So let me just tell you a little story, and this is one of my students, so he's probably heard my stories already. But the main thing being, nerves tell you you value something. They tell you that you care. So if you can just find a way to just embrace the fact that nerves are there, and oftentimes that can be enough to tamp them down to the point where they don't bother you quite so much. And then they can give you that extra little secret sauce that makes your performance kind of go over the top in expression. So for me, the most just physically upset I've been on stage since I joined the orchestra was playing the extremely high Beadle solo from Pictures at an Exhibition. And the whole week leading up to it, I had been practicing for months, knowing that I had to have at least maybe a third or a fourth higher in my comfortable range to know that I was going to knock it out near 100% when the orchestra came. And I was physically up for that performance. But if you don't know the solo, check it out on YouTube later. Beadle from Pictures at an Exhibition. It's actually kind of a long, mournful type of solo. So I couldn't just give it all the energy in the world and beat it to death. I had to find a way to find that calmness and bring the extra focus that maybe all those hormones and chemicals that your body is sending through your system to give yourself ultra focus. So it worked out well that time for me. There's been other times where things didn't work out well. I've lost on way more auditions than I've won. And I think that's the case for almost everyone. I believe it was Pete Norton told me, you're not even ready to be competitive until you've taken 30 auditions. I hope that's too many, but man, sometimes you just got to get reps. It's like hitting a home run. You got to take a lot of swings. So anytime you have the opportunity to audition for something, do a mock audition, a fake audition, even if it's for your cat, do it. You got to make something normalized. So any of my students have heard it's almost a mantra with me: familiar and then comfortable. So until something's familiar, it can't be comfortable. So that goes for all of your physical skills. That goes for any music you're working up, and that goes for the process of auditioning or playing difficult things. Even if it's just run-throughs in your head with your eyes closed and breathing deep, think of every detail you can find, and then it won't be the first time when you physically go there. Hope that helps. Hope that makes sense. And of course, that being, I think, Jonathan, let's keep talking. It's a process. It's absolutely is a process. Yeah, I think I made finals in like my very first audition, and then didn't make finals again for 10 or 12 auditions. And just like all of us, I've lost way more than I've won. And music isn't about winning and losing in competition, except that sometimes it is, just to get the work. Go in and try to express yourself the best way you possibly can. And then if you've done that, they can take it or leave it. And you've just said, this is who I am. This is what I am. Do I fit with what you're looking for? Cool, guys. Thank you for that. I'm just going to look one more time. Are there any more questions? Or I'm going to go ahead and sign off before the Instagram kicks me off in, 8 or 9 more minutes. Good to see you there. Alan Ramamalama, sorry. All kinds of fun people on here. Thank you so much for being on here. Hi, Yoshi. Good to see you. Steve Chester, all kinds of fun people. So thank you very much to the HSO musicians for hosting this. I'm glad to be a part of it. If you want to hear more of me, or if you have some specific things you'd like to hear from me, I think maybe next time I'll talk about those 3 big physical skills that I mentioned earlier: tone, articulation, and flexibility. I didn't want to go too far down the tuba-specific route or the nitty-gritty details, because I didn't know if it'd be tuba players or not who were listening today. So I wanted to get a little bit more overarching stuff. So if I give you nothing else today, playing musically is about differences. How loud can you play? How soft can you play? How many levels in between? How long can you play? How short can you play? How many levels in between? And with those, how heavy and how light are you doing those? How fast can you play? How slow can you play? If you play in an audition, you play an excerpt, I would sure love for you to be able to go at least 10% faster and 10% slower. And then a little more esoteric from where we're sitting on a 1-note instrument. How high and how low, and how are you going to affect those things? Go bows, absolutely. Good to see that in there. Thank you. I appreciate the bravo. Oh, good to see you, Kelsey. I don't remember if I waved or not. But thank you all so much. Have a great one. Hopefully we'll do it again. HSO musicians, follow them, and the Hawaii Symphony Orchestra. Take care, guys.